Hi, I'm Kyle Mazier, and the problem we're trying to solve today is traction. We're trying to get up that hill, and we've tried several times to get up that hill in the past. It's very steep, and it's very sandy, kind of silty, and it's a little bit off camber that one's to the right side there. And so the left front wheel has trouble getting traction. So we're gonna go ahead and drop the pressure down a little bit and give it one more shot, just to kind of get a really good baseline, to really give ourselves the best chance of getting up the hill. So it looks like we have pretty high tire pressure in here right now. It looks like we're about 45 PSI. So we're gonna drop the PSI down to about 18 and see if that'll get us up the hill better. We were able to make it up with that lower tire pressure, and so we'll go back to the shop and see if we can make it even better. So I wanted to show you for reference real quick what the factory diff looks like. So factory in the Model 3 drive unit, the diff looks like this. You can see there's the differential gears in there. And so this is gonna sit in between the wheels like this. And then there's a sub shaft on each side. And out of here comes each drive shaft or each half axle. So then there would be one more of these on this side. And then you can see this is a true open diff right here, because if there's no resistance on this side, when this rolls forward, this is going to roll back. So like when you're going around a corner, one wheel's going around the different radius than the other one, and so that's going to allow that differential motion. And then if there's good resistance on both of them, they'll spin, like this. And so this sits on here. And so we already pressed this off. But this is the final drive gear from the factory Model 3. And that's what's going to drive this differential. You can see the spider gears in here, and that's basically what it looks like factory. There's the pen that drives the torque from the housing into these gears and into the side spider gears. So basically that's the layout of the factory diff. It allows that differential motion of the right and left wheel. Allows you to go around a corner without skipping a tire. So it works really good on a factory car for driving on road purposes, but when it's put sideways in a four-wheel drive application or something like the Jeep, it doesn't work as good, or it's less than ideal, because it allows the front or rear axle to slip, and so that's why we're putting a spool in. Today we're going to put the spool in the Jeep, and this is going to give us a lot more traction. We're going to have a lot more fun in this thing. So we're going to start out by making this thing a little bit safer. This car is wired in a way that when the key is off, the contactors are open, which means that there's no high voltage flowing outside of the battery box. So this car is actually safe to work on. You can disconnect the high voltage wire on the motor side when the contactors or when the car is off. However, we're going to go ahead and take an extra little precaution step, and the way we have this car wired and the way we have this car set up is going to allow us to do that. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure the car is off, and the second thing we're going to do is go ahead and disconnect the service fuse. So let me go ahead and show you how we're going to do that. Okay, so we're over here on the center console, and as you'll recall, we used a Chevy Volt battery, and so we have the Chevy Volt battery box still mostly intact. And so, number one, you'll notice that the car is off, including the neutral light, none of these lights are on. The key is out of it, just to be sure. And then the next thing we're going to do to go ahead and take that service fuse out or that service disconnect, is we'll take this beauty cap off that we made, and under here is the stock Chevy service disconnect. So we're just going to go ahead and take that out. We'll place that right here. We'll put this beauty cap back on. And what that does is essentially breaks the battery pack in two and breaks the continuity between the two halves. So essentially there's a 200 volt battery right here and a 200 volt battery right here. And so even if somehow the contactors got closed or something like that, there would be no continuity through the battery. So it would still be safe, gives us a little extra level of precaution of safety. And also what it does is basically we have a 200 volt battery and a 200 volt battery right here that are isolated. And so even if something did happen inside the battery while we're working on it, you're only dealing with 200 volts and 200 volts instead of 400 volts. And so let's go ahead and disconnect the drive unit now. Hi. Okay, so now we're underneath the car, and you'll notice this is the back of the drive unit. And so now we're going to go ahead and start off by kind of disconnecting everything and get the drive unit ready to pull out. So we're just going to go ahead and cut some of these old zip ties. So I really like these fittings that we've used on here. These allow us to just really easily disconnect the lines on the car when everything's assembled. So we're going to go ahead and disconnect this and drain the fluid. You'll recall that these are the connectors that we made. These little fittings here allow us to go from the AN16. So these are really standard AN lines that we got from Brown & Miller Racing Supplies. We really, really like these. These are really professional AN lines. It's all stainless steel braided line with this really nice heat shield over the top of it. These were all custom made for us. This line up to here is. And then this fitting is a custom fitting that we made to go right to the Model 3 motor. So this slips right down to the standard Model 3 style fitting. Just allows us really easily to pop the fitting on and off to service the drive unit. And the other end is a standard AN16, which allows us to pop that fitting on and off really quick too. Just something that I think makes the cooling system look really clean, professional. And once you get to the AN16 or any of the AN standards, it's just really common line and fittings that you can buy in the racing industry. So it makes everything really easy to source and replace and service as well. So we're just gonna loosen up the main mounting bolts. There's 3 main mounting bolts. I think originally they're about 15 millimeters. I think they're 15 millimeter bolts, but I drilled them out to 5/8. Just with a 5/8 reamer, it drills out really nicely. It's a lot easier to source 5/8 bolts, at least here in the States. So there's one here, and then one up front. So we have this super trick kind of cradle that fits the motor very nicely. Usually we use it to move the
or to store these drive units on, but I just went ahead and ratchet strapped it to a motorcycle dolly. It's going to work really nicely for taking this drive unit out, I think. So I'm going to pull the yoke side of the drive shaft off, and this will should make it easier for the drive shaft to be removed. So there's 4 bolts on this side of the yoke, and then hopefully I'll be able to pull the drive shaft out. So we've managed to get the drive shafts out. And so hopefully we can just slowly drop the motor down now and get ready to completely remove it from the car. So we got the motor out. Now we're ready to take it over to the stand, clean it off, and then go ahead and start taking it apart. So from previous projects, we made this bar that mounts to the top of the Model 3 motor. So I'll go ahead and bolt that on. So we were able to lift it right off of the base that we took it out of the car onto. And then once that bar is on there, it slides right into an off-the-shelf engine stand. So now it's really nicely held on the engine stand, so we can work on it. And then in a little bit, we'll be able to actually rotate the motor 90 degrees when we get to that point. So it's easier once we start to take it apart. Okay, so we've managed to flip the motor on its side. There's a nice pin drilled in this bar. So if you rotate it 90 degrees and then drop the pin back in, it'll hold it sideways like this. So it makes it super nice. We went ahead and took the 10mm bolts off the side that hold the leads from the inverter to the motor leads. And then we went ahead and took a bunch of the bolts off the top here. And then the inverter should be ready to pop right off here. Just be real careful with that. Okay, so now that we have that inverter put away, we're ready to keep working our way through the motor. Let's go ahead and pop this half shaft out real quick because we're gonna have to take that apart. We'll take this bearing plate off and then we'll keep working our way through the motor. Okay, so we got all the bolts off around the perimeter that holds the case together, or I think so anyways. And so we're ready to pull the top cover off. Okay, so now we need to take this whole set of gears out as well as this kind of oil guide because this is the gear set that we need to take off so that we can swap the diff out. Okay, so we got the 3 gear sets out. So this is the one that we really care about. Right now it's got the limited slip installed. That was a limited slip that we installed a couple years back, and that's an aftermarket limited slip. We're going to pull this gear. This is the final gear of the reduction box. And then we're going to reinstall it on the factory diff housing, but we're going to put the spool in there, so that'll be a fully locked diff. So we're going to take the gear off of here, took all those bolts off all around, and then now we just need to get the gear off. It's pressed on there, so we're going to use a soft hammer to kind of work around. Just be careful. I like to put it on a wood surface. One, you don't want to mess up the housing. You don't want to mess up the housing itself, but then also you got to be careful because if you plan to reuse this housing at some point, you don't want to mess up these bearings. You know, this surface and this surface are even, so I hope most of the load's going through here when you hit the gear with the hammer, but you might have to check those bearings and replace them if you reuse it at some point. Okay, so I set the new gear on here. I took the old bolts out, obviously. Gonna reuse the same old bolts, up to your discretion whether you feel it necessary to acquire some new bolts. Sprayed some brake flush and cleaned off the old bolts real good. I'm gonna go ahead and put a little red Loctite on all these. And just gonna go ahead and set all the bolts all the way around. And then we'll kind of snug them up all together to pull that gear onto that boss, because it's still not setting all the way down yet. So I went around the circle and tightened them up like you would in a star pattern, like you would a wheel or something like that. Just gonna use a piece of paper. It's old machinist trick to make sure there's no air gap. There's gonna be a little bit of a chamfer on the bottom, so it will, but you should feel it very, very firmly stop if the materials, if the two pieces of metal are all the way up against each other. Okay, so we got the bolts ran in on this. The gear is now installed on the housing that we're going to use. So now it's time to install the torque mount and spool. Super nice, all machined in Southern California. 4 pieces right here. These are going to be the drive dogs that go right there, and then there's the 2 halves. So we're machining the lugs today, and we're just about to surface the top of the lug. This is kind of the drive lug that drives the 2 halves of the spool. So this is a really exciting part of the machining because it's a really cool trick tool path. So on this housing, we've already taken apart the stock differential, so this is going to make use of the stock differential housing. On the stock diff, the end gears have these little bushing plates on the back, so this is going to reuse that bushing plate. So you're going to make sure that bushing plate's sitting in out there, and then you're going to feed this first half in, and then you're going to go ahead and feed the second half in. Make sure the bushing is on the second half as well. There should be 2 bushings installed on the factory diff, and then you're going to go ahead and feed the first drive dog on there, and then you'll feed the second. Make sure everything stays real clean as this goes inside the drive unit, and then you'll feed the second drive there. You might have to kind of work around where the bolts come out there. And then once you have those drive dogs installed, you're going to rotate it 90 degrees. And you're going to take the pin that you would have to press out when taking the stock diff apart. And you're going to feed it in right back through, and it's going to go right through the holes in the drive dogs and come right out the other side of the housing. And so it's a press fit, and there's a pin that gets pressed back to hold this in place. So make sure that pin is lined up good, or the hole is lined up good. And then we're gonna go ahead and give it a couple of whacks with the mallet and get it to go. It should be pretty good. So when we took this apart, there's a pin right here that we had to press out to get that cross pin out. But the bearing blocks it, but there's no need in order to get that cross pin out to take the cotter, or take the roll pin all the way out. So just press it far enough so you can get that cross pin out, and then just leave it there, and we're gonna go ahead and just press that right back now that the pin is back in place. Should be good placement. And so there you go. You have the spool installed now. It's looking really good in there. And we're ready to put the drive unit back together. We're gonna clean this off a little bit, make sure it's real clean before we put it back together, and then we're gonna put everything back together. And we're ready to install. Look at those nice cut splines. High quality, hardened steel. This last step's always a little tricky. It's easiest to do this leaving the motor in, it's less work. But it's a little bit tricky to get this last assembly of feeding with the motor in. Perfect. Because the gears are meshing, and you gotta kind of center the motor at the same time, so it's pretty tricky, but that was a record for me. So on to the next step, start putting this thing back together. So along with swapping the spool in, we're gonna go ahead and put some worn locking hubs on the front. This will allow us to unlock the hubs and essentially switch to two-wheel drive when we're driving around town. Because the front and rear axle are gonna be locked to each other now because of the spool in the center, we want the ability to switch to some other mode of driving when we're around town. So to accomplish that, we're gonna put worn locking hubs that'll allow us to unlock the hubs, and the front wheels will no longer be driven when we're around town, and we can switch to rear wheel drive. And then when we're driving around town, the rear wheel drive will be unlocked because we will disengage the air locker in the back. And so that will give us just a regular differential when driving around town. So the Jeep will really handle nicely around town. And then when we're off-road, when we're in real adverse conditions, we can switch the front hubs back on, and that'll give us that four-wheel drive where the front and rear axle are locked together. So let's go ahead and open up these hub lockers. And these things are gonna look really nice on here. So let's get started. So we got the first side in, and so let's go over to the jar side. These snap-on snap groove rings are really nice to have. Okay, so we have the tires down at 18 PSI about. This is after we've installed the center locker or the center spool. So let's go ahead and try it out and see if there's a difference. Okay, so that was a huge success. Just from inside the Jeep, you could tell that it was way more positively locked, way more traction all around. I could go up the hill with way more control. Before I was having to use a lot of velocity to get over the hill, a lot of speed. But now, with the added traction of the spool in the middle, we were able to approach the hill in a much more controlled, slow speed fashion. And even with that, we had a lot more extra traction than we needed. And it almost felt from inside the Jeep like it was launching off the lip. Like, I don't know if you could tell from the video, but it really kind of catapulted me over the lip of the hill there. So super excited to continue to explore just how much more capability the Jeep has with the spool in the middle. Let's continue this next week.